All right, good morning everyone. Welcome back to day 2 of the Coursera virtual workshop. We're really excited today to talk about assessments. Yesterday you talked about your learner story and thinking about the overall content of what you're creating to help get your learner from point A to point B. Assessments are really the linchpin to your content and creating authentic assessments that give learners the opportunity to practice the skills that you have taught them in a really real world way. Before we jump in, I just want to remind everyone to go to that white grid in the upper right corner of your screen and turn on your Q&A app so that you can ask questions as they pop up. And if people want to just confirm that they're on by sending a quick hello message through that app, that would be great. There we go. All right. Okay, assessments, as we were saying, the linchpin of what you're working on. Why are assessments important? Let's start there. As you talked about yesterday, you're trying to get learners to a particular destination. Yesterday you were looking at what is their learner story, and so that's where are they now, is that initial crux, and then where are they going to go? What are the skills, attitude, knowledge changes that you are helping enact through your course content? What is that transformation that you're helping make happen? That happens through all of the pieces that you're putting into your course, but most importantly through your assessment, because that's where they are applying the skills, attitude, and knowledge that you're helping them build. And so as you think about where the learner's starting point is and where their destination is, there are many spots along the way where you want to check in and be sure that they have reached that skill set level before they go on to the next spot. You want to ensure that, and so for that you use summative assessments, which are graded and required to be able to complete the course overall. And here they're demonstrating those new skills. In between, though, we know that learners don't just jump right into knowing everything. We need to give them the opportunity to practice and for them to check and see where there are gaps in learning so that they can go back and improve on that before they go into that final check state. So formative assessments are a really important opportunity to provide feedback in their learning process. And these are not required in the sense that if a learner skips them but completes the summative assessment, they can still complete the course, but are really crucial to include along the journey so that learners are able to tap into them as needed based on their skill set and their learning experience. So from there, let's jump into the different types of assessments that we have on the platform. There are 4 different assessments, and each of these can be done in either a practice, formative, or graded summative way. We're going to focus in on 2 in particular this morning, quizzes and peer review, as those are ones that are most widely used across all content. But we also have programming assignments, which are specifically ways in which you can develop auto-grader. So learners are writing code and getting their code checked, but in an automated way that goes beyond what can be done with quizzes. There's also the opportunity for LTI or integration of other tools from external parties into our platform. So if either of those are things that you think are going to be really valuable to your course content, we can talk about that either in the QA session or that's something that you can work with your partnership manager to get connected to the right people to help you walk through that. And on the TNL team, we are happy to talk through those different options with you also. We'll start then with quizzes and what it is that we can do with those. So there's 3 main kind of areas in which you can use quizzes. You can use it most traditionally for building knowledge. You can also set them up as an opportunity for reflection, and overall you're using them as a way to engage the learner at kind of all levels of Bloom's taxonomy and educational attainment, so from recall all the way to application through this one tool. So it is one tool that can feel simple but has the opportunity to open lots of different doors in terms of how you engage learners. Let's start first with how we can use it to build knowledge. One of the key components of quizzes is being able to provide explanatory feedback. So when you're developing a quiz system, you're able to add feedback for each option choice that you include for the question that you're asking. And so what this means is that you can separate out what you're giving to incorrect options and help them understand what it is that made that answer incorrect. But you can also give feedback to what makes an answer correct. And this is really valuable in the case that you have learners that are guessing or that are unsure. You get to solidify exactly why the answer that they chose was right. In terms of incorrect answers, you're able to differentiate that along the lines of which incorrect answer they chose. And here, something that you want to think about is if you're doing this in a formative quiz or a summative quiz, where for formative quizzes, you really want to use this as an opportunity to explain through the thought process and how they should have learned to do the question, and ideally then have another variation that they can try when they retake the quiz. Whereas for a summative assessment, as these are mandatory and are at the place where they should have this knowledge in full, you want to give them a hint or help them think about, how they should be approaching the problem, or point them back to the resources earlier in that module that allow them to learn the skills they need, but not actually give or fully explain the incorrect answers and how to get to the right ones. You also have corrective feedback, and this is more along the lines of what you want to do in the summative assessment, where you're pointing the learner back to the video or the piece of content that is related specifically to this answer or to this question, so that you're helping them figure out what is their next step when they get stuck and they see that they got the answer wrong. As we were saying, you can also do a combination of this. So you can give a hint that helps point them in the right direction of how they should be approaching the question, while also giving them a resource if that hint isn't enough to trigger the knowledge to go back and review more thoroughly. All right, so then we can look at different ways to engage the learner through Quizative. In video quizzes are something that you can put into the video itself. You do this after the processing of the video when it's uploaded on the platform, and you can use that as a way to connect with learner on a variety of levels. In this case here, we have an example of a poll question that was used in a terrorism and counterterrorism course. And in this way, learners were simply giving their opinion. And after answering the question, they were able to see what is actually the sentiment of all the learners that have taken that quiz in this course so far. And so in that way, they remember and they realize that they're not in this alone, even though it's them sitting at their computer. There is a whole community here, and they're sharing their opinions through this really simple tool that also connects them back to the material that they're learning. And then you can also use quizzes for reflection opportunities. So within each section, whether you're doing this as an in-video quiz, if you're doing it as a discussion prompt or in a reflective type question itself, you can do things like getting learners to stop and think, right? How can you direct them in terms of where they should be focusing their energy and their time? It's through interaction with the instructor that's pre-thought out in the process of creating the course that you can do things like motivating retention from starting the video, understanding what it is that they're going to get from that video, so that then they can really jump in full force. From there, let's go into some peer review examples and how we can use peer review to really develop authentic assessments throughout the course. So in a peer review assignment, this is distinct from quizzes in that it's other learners that are reviewing and grading the work. And so in this way, learners actually get two opportunities to learn. One is when they are developing the assessment themselves so that they can submit it. So they're following your instructions and they're creatively building something or figuring out the code to analyze data, or whatever is the assignment that you are putting them through to get to show that mastery of their skills. Then, once they've done that, on the flip side, they have the opportunity to grade their peers. And so in that way, they're seeing other examples of how people approach this work, but they're also using your rubric to critically identify places that their peers did well and have room for improvement, and in that way are learning to do that on their own work. So we have different peer review options where you can have it open and available to understand each other's experience as a practice opportunity. And then we also have the graded or summative peer reviews, which are required for passing. And in these, you have to both submit and get a passing grade, but also have done your required reviews to be able to pass and complete the course successfully. All right, here's an example of an open and optional peer review example. This is one that comes from the Learning How to Learn course. And so if you haven't taken a look at that, I would recommend jumping into that course at some point and looking through some of the assignments, the structure of the course. This is really one that we hold up as an exemplar of doing a lot of things very well. In this particular peer review that is optional, learners have the opportunity to engage with their peers in a different way. So they're asked to create a quick video that introduces themselves to the rest of the course and sets their own goals for the course. And this is valuable for a couple of reasons. One, you're connecting learners to each other, but you're also getting them to reflect on why it is that they're in this course and what their goal is for when they're finished. And in that way, you're also motivating them to make it all the way through because they've written down what it is that brings them to the course and they've shared it with others. When they are then grading each other, they have the opportunity to meet their classmates essentially and provide feedback. And in this case, the grading is much more of, was a video submitted and what is feedback or what is encouragement that you would give to your peer so that there is that interaction, but there's not a right or wrong in terms of how they introduce themselves. Here, in this case, we're looking at an example of a phased peer review or a graded summative peer review. And so in this case, they need to do a case study based on what they learned in the operational business course. And you can see that very clearly is set out what needs to be done to earn all the points in the assessment. There are 6 components that they need to have incorporated into their answer on which they're going to be graded. And so here there's a much more rigorous rubric that was developed to be able to analyze exactly what was submitted for each of these components. So let's walk through briefly the overall peer review process so that you can have a sense of what it looks like from your side and from the learner side. So the first piece that learners are going to encounter are the assessment instructions. And so this is a place for you to provide all the information needed in terms of what a learner should be doing to successfully complete the assignment. What information needs to be included, how are they supposed to upload it and submit it to the assignment space so that their peers are able to evaluate it. From there, they're going to go into the My Submission section. And so this is where they're going to be prompted to actually submit the components that the instructions explained how to create. And so in this particular case, you start with a title. So every assignment has a title. And here there are 4 components that they were creating throughout the assignment process. 2 of them are files that are being uploaded. And then 2 of them are text areas where they are explaining or providing information about the work that they did. So these spots where learners are submitting their content, these are what on your authoring side will be considered prompts. And so as you're thinking about the assignment that learners are creating and developing for your course, you want to think about how do you break that up into a few different prompts that both leads the learner to submit the right content, as well as then helps the peer that is doing the grading to zero in on the right section of the submitted work for the rubrics that you're providing. And then here you can see an example of a submission to that where the photograph is visible, as well as the rubrics that are then put in by the instructor to help guide the grading process. So in this case specifically, the rubrics included, was this a photograph of a scene? And then there's a simple yes, no. Does the photograph appear to have been made with fast enough shutter speed, right? So you're clearly giving the instructions around what they should be focusing in on that particular component that was submitted. And these are what we would consider the rubric prompts and the rubric options when you're in the authoring side of the peer review interface. So in the same way that the overall prompt is what are learners submitting for their assignment, the rubric prompt is what should the peer be evaluating to answer this question or to give a number of points. And then you're able to set those options. So it can be a yes, no binary, or it can be a sliding scale. We usually recommend going between a 3 or a 5-point scale, but not beyond that. Even 5 sometimes is a bit too much for a learner to have to decide between. And so being able to say, fully accomplished, medium accomplished, or didn't accomplish is a good set of rubrics to guide the way that they're evaluating their peers' work. Here's another example of what things can look like on the review side. So in this case, the learner was asked to submit a statement after their photographs describing the content that they created. And so here, the grading component of this is simply, was a statement submitted by the learner? Because the focus area was making sure that they had completed that part of the task. There wasn't a right or wrong way to do that. But then the learner that was providing the feedback was given an opportunity to share their thoughts. And so this final open text box is a great way to form relationships between learners, to give the reviewer an opportunity to provide open-ended feedback to the learner. And we find that this is usually one of the most rewarding components on both sides of that review and receiving feedback section. And so it's a great opportunity for you to help learners think more about their content, as well as how they engage with their peers. All right, a few examples just to give another sense of how these peer review submissions can look. This is another sample assessment, which is actually from an Intro to Data course. And what you can see here is that it looks like what they're submitting is actually an analysis, but they also share the code that was created for their analysis. And so learners are seeing, that are doing the review, are seeing the overall thought process that went into the work that was submitted by their peer. So really, there's a lot of variety that you can go into the type of assignments that you are creating as peer review assignments. This is another opportunity for a practice peer review, which is if you're building up to a larger assignment, you can give practice opportunities for learners to request feedback from their peers. By making it practice, you're saying that it's not mandatory, but it does give an opportunity for those who would like more stepping stones towards the larger goal to interact with their peers. And so you'll really want to think about what are the minimum touch points towards a larger project that you want to enforce for all of your learners. And all of those should be mandatory or summative milestones. And then giving opportunities such as these for learners to go beyond that in terms of practice and feedback cycles. As you think about your rubric, this is really what is going to make the peer review successful. So yes, it's about an exciting assignment that connects to real world problems, but by clearly laying out how learners are going to be evaluated, as well as helping the evaluator that makes the overall process of peer review really successful on both sides. And so here you can see, as we were saying, kind of this sliding scale from 1 to 4. So right in between that 3 to 5 that I was saying, and has a really clear explanation of what it means to be excellent versus what it means to be unacceptable based on the categories that were there. And so you're not leaving a lot to interpretation on the side of the reviewer. You don't want it to be something that 2 different people could look at the same assignment and go in different directions. That's the level of clarity that you want to have with your rubric design. And then, you know, that was the rubric kind of at each of the categories, and then you transfer that into the rubric as we saw here. And so one thing that you can consider in how you can help learners be really great at providing feedback is you can start by training them. There are different ways in which instructors have trained learners on how to do a good peer review. You could create a quick video in which you walk through the process of peer reviewing a sample assessment that is in there and explain your thinking at each of the peer review prompts. Another option is to create a quiz like this in which the learners are given a sample assessment and then are given the questions that would be the prompts for the review as quiz questions along. And because in this case you're looking at a specific assignment, there is in fact a right and wrong way to grade it, and so you're able to create a quiz from that and use the feedback within the quiz to explain the process of grading effectively. The other thing that you want to think about is the motivation required to complete a feedback or to complete a peer review and to give good feedback. You know, we see drop off in various places within courses, and obviously as the stakes of how much time you spend on any particular item gets go up, then it's easier for learners to say, oh, this isn't what I want to be doing with my time. And so one of the things that we need to think about before every video, before every quiz, and before every peer review is how do you engage the learner to really be motivated to put the time into the work that they're doing, as well as into the feedback that they're giving. And so helping learners remember that the assignment that they're grading is actually tied to one of their peers, that is a real person who's going to be receiving that feedback is really valuable in putting them in the right frame of mind as they jump into the feedback providing process. And this goes back to that idea of leaving an open text box at the end of the review rubric, such that learners can provide feedback to their peers. Another twist on this is to have the learner ask for specific feedback. So as part of the assignment submission, at the end you can have an open text question for the learner for them to respond to what is it that they are looking for in feedback on their own work. Because often when we submit work, we know where are the places that we could improve, and then this guides the learner that is providing feedback into where they should focus in their open text response. Another important component is to guide the learner that is providing feedback with some prompts. So if you know ways in which students in your courses usually fail or have room for improvement on their work, then you can use some of these feedback prompts to guide the reviewing learner on what they can be telling their peer. Each of the modules that you're creating, each of the courses that you're creating have an overview of the types of assessments that you're going to be making. When you think about peer review, there's a few components that you can add to really make it a valuable experience. And we've talked about some of them, but summarizing here in terms of including an example submission. Often it's great to include ones that are on the higher end of the spectrum as well as the lower end of the spectrum, so that learners can see that difference and have something to connect to when they're providing feedback, as well as to open the realm of possibilities of what they can be creating with their assignments. Including ungraded peer reviews gives opportunities for connection across learners, as well as the chance to practice and get feedback before submitting something for the total grade. Explaining the importance of feedback puts learners really in the right frame of mind to provide good feedback and reviews to their peers, which is really critical to the overall process. And then using feedback prompts in the areas in which you are asking reviewers to provide open-ended feedback will help to guide the direction of that feedback. All right, and so the last piece is really around building an assessment plan. And this is where we can jump into questions, anything that you want to think about. The main piece here is that now you have these two core components. From yesterday, you have your learner's story, so where are they today and where are they trying to go? From that, you get your set of skills that they should be acquiring through your course. And from there, you want to say, okay, for each of these core skills that a learner should be getting through my course, this is the assessment that will allow them to demonstrate their mastery of that skill. And these are the practice assessments that will give them the opportunity to check their learning along the way to that mastery. And from there, you'll have your kind of shell of assignments that you can start building and creating. And around that, develop the content, the videos, the readings that are needed to work towards those assignments. All right. As we drop the slides and go back to our video feed, one question that we often get is around figuring out how many assessments are really the right number of assessments for your course. So again, this is going to depend very much on what it is that you are teaching. As our rule of thumb and kind of the baseline component is that for every module that you teach, so that's every core topic that you teach, you want to have at least one summative assessment. And so that graded or final assessment for the module is where learners should be proving out their mastery of that subject. And then what you want to think about is what are the practice sections that they need along the way to be able to reach that mastery. And so there you'll probably have at least one, but potentially multiple formative assessments throughout the way. The pedagogy checklist that we have, and that's in the Coursera 101 course that you were directed to earlier, also goes through more specifics of how many assignments you want to create, what type of assignments you might think of creating based on the content that you're teaching. So now please go ahead and use the Q&A section on the sidebar to pop in any questions that you have from all the content that we went over, or if there's anything that you want to connect back to yesterday or other things that you've been thinking about as you develop assessments for your course. Another question that we often get is that learners complain throughout the peer review process about the large variation in grades that they are receiving from their peers. And so, you may want to know how you can reduce that variation of peer review results. This is a great question, and I think this shows some of both the benefit but potential risk to using peer review. So the crux of peer review valuable feedback comes from how you set up the review rubrics and the direction that you give in how learners should be grading each other. This variation in grade comes from rubrics that are too open-ended that allow me and another peer to review the same prompt in different ways. What you want to be really clear about is your definition of things. So for example, if you are saying, was the submission logical? What is logical to me may be somewhat different than what was logical to a peer and different than your definition as a content expert. And so you want to define what logical means. What are the components within the learner response that they should be looking for to be able to say yes or no? This is logical, this was only moderately but somewhat confusing, or no, this wasn't logical. If there are components in your course to harken them back to, you can also do that to help them figure out how they're doing the grading process. A question that we got from email is, can we limit the number of attempts for each summative assignment? So on the platform, we really focus towards mastery learning. And a key component of that is the opportunity to try something, get feedback, learn the material again, practice again, and then come back and show your mastery through that iterative process. So as such, there is not an ultimate limit that you can put on the assignments, but you can time limit them. So you can say that a learner can try 3 times within an 8-hour period. And that will mean that after their 3rd attempt in 8 hours, they'll be locked out of that assignment temporarily. And this is actually really valuable pedagogically, where we find that if you just keep attempting the same assignment too quickly, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to go back, to rest your brain, to practice, to relearn. And so you know what would be a good balance there, but we're happy to give recommendations also. Another question on peer review is about limiting creativity. So here it says, I don't want to limit learners' creativity by providing this rubric, but at the same time, I want learners to feel the review is accurate and objective. Are there any suggestions? This is great. This ties back to the earlier question that we were talking about in terms of limiting the variability of grades between peer reviewers. Let's jump into Coursera 101, as there we had pointed out a few assignments that we said are really valuable. So I'll go ahead and screen share, and you'll see that in week 4, of Coursera 101, we show 3 different peer review exemplars. In this first one, you see a practice peer graded assignment, which is about describing your most inspiring leader. And so overall, the instructions are to present your most inspiring leader and explain why he or she exemplifies leadership for you. So this is an assignment that is really rich with creativity and open-endedness, right? A learner can really go anywhere in terms of finding their inspiring leader, and it's about that connection to them. If you look at the review criteria, the places where you're great at, and this is a course that's teaching about leadership and what creates great leaders, it's around the accuracy of the characteristics that are chosen. So these are objective components that are being taught earlier in the course. Then there's one around the coherence between the reason why you chose the leader and the characteristics identified. And so this is not around a right or wrongness, but around how do you connect, how do you explain why those are valuable to you. And then that continues into the next one in terms of why these reflect your particular mindset of leadership. And so if we jump into the My Submission section, you can see how the learner is guided to submit their assignment connected to those particular rubrics also. So in this way, you're guiding the way that the learner is thinking through their assignment, but also helping the reviewer connect the prompts, the review criteria that you've created for each of them to the appropriate section in the learner's response. And so this is an example of how you can be providing distinct and concrete rubrics while still leaving things open for creativity in the assignment itself. I think one of the big pieces is thinking about where is there a right and wrong in what they're created, and where is there this sliding scale of having approached it in the right way. One thing that I would really recommend is looking not only at these other assignments that are shown as exemplars in Coursera 101, but also jumping into to some of the courses that are on the platform, either ones that are connected to the content you want to be teaching, or just things that you're excited about, and try some of the assignments. As a learner, what is it that gets you excited about doing this assignment, or where were you frustrated, and use that as a learning and test bed for the work that you're doing. As I don't see any additional questions beyond these in the Q&A section, I'm going to go ahead and pause for about 20 seconds to give you a chance to ask anything else that you'd like to know before we close for today. And while we're waiting for people to put in their questions, I also just wanted to remind you that the slides from this presentation, as well as the recording, are going to be made available to you. So you can review these, go back through them, and also send questions our way after. All right. Well, with that, it looks like the assessments portion is pretty clear. I think as you jump into the platform and start developing assessments, looking at the goals that you have for your learners and creating assessments around them, I encourage you to reach out to the team here that is helping you with your content development. We can connect with you, our teaching and learning specialists and associates that would be happy to review assessment drafts and provide feedback on the direction that you're going. Coursera 101 is also a great resource for you, and as I said, this video and the slides for it will be made available to you shortly after we close out. So with that, I'll wrap up for today, and I'm looking forward to seeing all the great courses that you create. Thanks so much.